Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the retirement ceremony for the month of May. The official party for today's ceremony is the Commanding General and the Command Sergeant Major of the Maneuver Support Center of Excellence and Fort Leonard Wood, Major General Christopher G. Beck and Command Sergeant Major Jorge Arzabala, Jr. On behalf of the Maneuver Support Center of Excellence, we thank you for attending today's ceremony and supporting our retirees. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing of the National Anthem and the invocation by Chaplain Gregory Clark.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending. As you pray in your traditions, will you join me as I pray in mine? Almighty God, I can't thank you enough for this special day to honor our comrades. With their self-sacrificing service, they have helped progress our nation's goals of freedom and peace throughout the world in ways that only you, Almighty God, can see. Thank you for the impact these new retirees have undeniably had on countless other service members. May our reflections of their careers and achievements inspire us to excel in our remaining time in uniform or civilian service. May we live the Army values which always mirror your teachings. May we finish the course with utmost quality as our comrades have done. Finally, Lord, will you bless this time today? We honor you by following your word to render honor to those who are due honor. I pray these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. We are here to honor 18 soldiers who have completed over 394 years of honorable service to our nation. Only 1% of the United States population chooses to serve their country, and currently only 3% of the population has served. From that, only 17% of service members that serve go on to reach retirement. The retirement ceremony is a time-honored tradition to recognize those service members and their families who have served their country with honor. We know that retirement ceremonies date back to 13 BC, when the Roman Emperor, Caesar Augustus, offered Roman legionnaires a retirement package. Caesar intended this to serve as an incentive to retired soldiers to remain loyal and not rise up against the government. Moving forward, the United States Congress established pensions for the U.S. Army in 1776. In the years before the Second World War, the retirement systems of the United States military were highly varied between the different branches of service. Today, all the services have the same retirement system and recognize their retirees in similar ceremonies. Today's ceremony will consist of welcoming the official party, national anthem, invocation, reading of awards and certificates, remarks by the host, presentation of awards and certificates, the Army Song, and finishes with congratulating the retirees and families being honored here today. Our Soldiers for Life have undoubtedly earned our recognition for their accomplishment through their own self-sacrifice and service to a grateful nation. Each retiree will receive a certificate of retirement from the Armed Forces of the United States of America, signed by the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Randy A. George. Each retiree will also receive the American flag in recognition of their service to the nation. Each spouse will receive a certificate of appreciation signed by the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Randy A. George, and will also be presented with a bouquet of flowers or a boutonat. The flowers are compliments of the Fort Leonard Wood Mid-Missouri chapter of the Association of the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Beck.
Good afternoon and welcome, folks. What a great day for a ceremony to honor our retirees and their families. It is truly our pleasure to be here today. And yes, I do want to thank all of you for your service. We'll get to a little bit more of that in a minute. But I do want to take a minute to thank the protocol team, the chaplain, the music. Unfortunately, we can't do the 399th band anymore. The sergeant major did offer to sing, but I asked him not to. But at the end of the day, it takes a lot to put this event on, but it is absolutely befitting the service that you all have provided to our country. So before I thank the soldiers, let me take a minute and thank the families. You are truly the unsung heroes. You know, we talk all the time in the military about readiness. We are gauged on our readiness, our weapons readiness, our equipment readiness, our soldier readiness. All of those are extremely important to ensure that our formations are ready to fight and win our nation's wars. But the readiness we don't measure is the readiness that the families provide. At the end of the day, each one of you has contributed to the readiness of your soldier in ways that you will never understand. You have allowed your soldier to do what it is he or she signed up to do. You have always been there, whether it was deployments, field training exercises, or just late nights, you were always there. You were always there to ensure that everything in the home was good to go. And what I'll say, and each one of your soldiers will readily admit this, was if you're able to take care of the home, then they could go to work and do their job. And that matters. So I don't know, some of you may know that the soldiers, the retirees, were asked to fill out a questionnaire. And the questionnaire included lots of questions. I'll talk about a few things of those later as I go through my remarks. But one of the questions in there dealt with the support of the family and who was their main supporter. And I will tell you, to an individual, whether it was a spouse or family, parents, they all said the same thing. They could not have done what they have done over the last however many years without the support they received from their family. So again, you all are the unsung heroes that truly make our military the ready formation that it is. So thank you all very much. So now as we transition to the retirees, wow, this is a pretty cool day. This is a pretty amazing day. I want to thank you all for all the service that you have provided. As you heard the narrator say, 394 years. That's pretty amazing. You guys look really good for that old. The reality is, you have seen a lot of changes throughout your career. You've seen changes in how we fight. Many of you joined during the global war on terrorism and did rotations back to back to Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, we fight multi-domain operations. And instead of the CENTCOM AOR, we're focused on China and the homeland. You've also seen other changes. I don't even want to know how many different uniforms that you have gone through in your career. how many different evaluation forms you have gone through. And for those of you that aren't sticking around past 1 June, you're cheating yourself because you could have gone through another change of the PT test. But the reality is, through all of that change, your commitment and your passion has been consistent. The way you've gone about your job has been consistent. Again, back to those questionnaires. One of the questions asked was, what would you tell the next generation of soldiers coming up behind you? And the answer is like, be all you can be. Never miss an opportunity. The comments like that went on and on and on. Because all of you have been completely committed to not only the organizations you've been in, the installations you've been at, the MOS that you represent, but most importantly, the people. And that's what really makes what you have done so important. So that video fires me up, and it fires me up for several reasons. I smacked the sergeant major when it was over, and I said, wow, how cool it is that we get to be in charge of this place. It's an incredible opportunity, but what that video shows is the cycle of life, the cycle of your career and the cycle of our military. So one of you in there, and I'll know when they come up to the stage and I shake their hand, but one of you answered a questionnaire when you got back to Fort Leonard Wood this time, and it was a few years ago. You were invited to, unbeknownst to you, you didn't know why, but you were invited up to see the post sergeant major. And he happens to be a friend of mine, Sergeant Major Arzabala's predecessor, Command Sergeant Major De La Pena. And in your questionnaire you answered, you were invited up to see him because he was your drill sergeant when you were a basic trainee. So yes, that means he is that old, but it also means that's that cycle. Because all of you, no matter where you fit into the organization, and I don't mean just Fort Leonard Wood, I mean the Army, you had an influence on those young men and women we saw in that video. Whether it was direct, and you helped them train as they learned, as we said earlier, the 1% of our nation that serves, or whether it was indirect and influencing them through organizations or the leaders. What's amazing is the impact that you had on all of those folks and hundreds of thousands like them throughout our Army. So I definitely want to congratulate you. I want to honor you for, in almost all cases, 20 plus years of service, and again, 394 cumulative years to our Army. We can't replace that overnight. When you all walk out of this auditorium, and then some of you have a few days or weeks later until you retire, we cannot replace you overnight. It takes a while to grow an NCO or an officer or a warrant officer. But I will tell you that I am very confident that based on your commitment and passion to each one of the young men and women we saw in that video, your legacy will carry us through those 394 years. Your legacy, and none of you served for a legacy, but the legacy that you will leave is the young men and women we saw in those videos. And the excitement they have to get to the point where you are today, to get to the influence, the leadership, and the commitment that you have shown over your careers. So we will bridge that gap, and while it's never easy to say goodbye to 394 years of experience, we will bridge that gap because of what you all have done during your time in service. What you have created and the leadership that you have provided to all of those young men and women and to all of those units and to all of those organizations, that cannot be replaced. So as we keep moving forward, what I would challenge you with is please remember, you are always part of our team. Whether that's locally here at Fort Leonard Wood and you're always welcome back, or whether it's a soldier for life, no matter where you're going to retire. And again, you look at the commitment of all of you, back to those questionnaires I've referenced a few times. There was more than a handful that said, next job, I'm looking to be a civilian and continue training the next generation of soldiers. So your commitment will help us bridge that gap, and you will always, always be a soldier for life and a member of our team. The last favor I'll ask of all of you. So as you heard the narrator say, less than 1% of our country serves currently, and less than 3% have served in total. Help us with that. Tell your story. Because as you guys hang up your uniform and you start to tell your story to family and friends, I was blessed. My grandfather was in World War II. He told me many stories. As he got older, some of the stories were very much the same, but they had told me many stories. But I will challenge you, tell your story to the next generation, because each one of you has a story to tell. I don't care where you served. I don't care if you were in combat, if you went multiple times, if you never went. You have a story to tell. And that next generation is out there right now. And many of them are struggling for what's next. What am I going to do? What is my future? And some of you thought you were going to enlist in the military. I'm just going to get my college money. Yep, we're celebrating 20 plus years of service today. So you screwed that up, just so you know. But the reality is, guys, there's somebody out there that's struggling with what's next for them. And while many of you don't like to talk about what you've done just because of your pride and your humbleness, the challenge I would give you is take the time to talk about it. Because a lot of young men and women out there need to hear that story. They need to hear what the military is to the population, what we mean to this nation, and what you all have done to serve in the greatest army, in the greatest military, as part of the greatest nation in the world. So please tell your story. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for the service you've given. Thank you to the families that have allowed you to give that service. Victory starts here. Victory through skill. Be all you can be.
Ladies and gentlemen, General Beck and Sergeant Major Arzabala will now present the retirees and their spouses with their certificates.
They were with you the whole time, but they are not coming up on stage. It's the whole team.
Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mario D. Alvarez. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Mario D. Alvarez, is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the 5th Engineer Battalion, 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a senior automotive technician. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Mercy, and family. General Beck is now presenting Chief Warrant Officer 4 Alvarez his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Alvarez with the Certificate of Appreciation and bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Chief Warrant Officer 4 retired Mario Alvarez and family. First Sergeant Kyle Gerbas. First Sergeant Kyle R. Gerbas is retiring after a distinguished military career culminating in his assignment to Forward Support Company, 5th Engineer Battalion, 36th Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a first sergeant. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Aria, and family. General Beck is now presenting First Sergeant Gerbas his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Gerbas with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you First Sergeant Retired Kyle Gerbas and family. Master Sergeant Lindsay A. Lee. Master Sergeant Lindsay A. Lee is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in her assignment to 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a senior career manager. She is retiring to the state of Missouri with her family. General Beck is now presenting Master Sergeant Lee her retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Master Sergeant Retired Lindsay Lee and family. Sergeant First Class Paul J. Johnson. Sergeant First Class Paul J. Johnson is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the United States Army Medical Department activity, General Leonard Wood Army Community Hospital, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a nutrition care non-commissioned officer. He is retiring to the state of Texas with his spouse, Monica, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Johnson his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Johnson with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Paul Johnson and family. Sergeant First Class Peter A. Pena. Sergeant First Class Peter A. Pena is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Headquarters 169 Engineer Battalion, 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a sapper instructor. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Nivea, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Pena his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Pena with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Peter Pena and family. Sergeant First Class Michael D. Chilcoat. Sergeant First Class Michael D. Chilcoat is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an Installation Operations Watch Officer. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Tanya, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Chilcoat his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Chilcoat with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Michael Chilcoat and family. Sergeant First Class Carla R. Guen. Sergeant First Class Carla R. Guen is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in her assignment to the Combat Training Company, Department of Emergency Services, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a military police investigator. She is retiring to the state of Missouri with her spouse, Luis, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Guen her retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mr. Guen with the Certificate of Appreciation and a boutonniere in appreciation for his support to his spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Carla Guen and family. Sergeant First Class Brandon M. Davis is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the 35th Engineer Battalion, 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a Land and Ammo NCOIC. He is retiring to the state of Wisconsin with his spouse, Amy, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Davis his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Davis with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Brandon Davis and family. Sergeant First Class Simon L. Strand is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the Basic Military Police Training Division, 14th Military Police Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an instructor. He is retiring to the state of Indiana with his family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Strand his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Simon Strand and family. Sergeant First Class Christopher D. Hulst is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 14th Military Police Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a military police course manager. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Ashley, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Hulst his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Hulst with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Christopher Hulst and family. Sergeant First Class John K. Rinky is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the United States Army Medical Department activity, General Leonard Wood Army Community Hospital, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an operations non-commissioned officer. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Jennifer, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Rinky his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Rinky with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you Sergeant First Class Retired John Rinky and family. Sergeant First Class Regis A. Deglund is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to DISA Global Field Command, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, as a Cybersecurity Compliance Section NCOIC. He is retiring to the state of Florida with his family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Deglund his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired Regis Deglund and family. Sergeant First Class David E. Mashburn is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 14th Military Police Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a Military Police Senior Training Manager. He is retiring to the state of Tennessee with his spouse, Patricia, and family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant First Class Mashburn his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Mashburn with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant First Class Retired David Mashburn and family. Staff Sergeant H. Akau is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Horizontal Skills Division, 554 Engineer Battalion, 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an instructor. He is retiring to the state of Texas with his spouse, Penina, and family. General Beck is now presenting Staff Sergeant Akau his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Staff Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Akau with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Staff Sergeant Retired H. Akau and family. Staff Sergeant Ronald A. Dickerson is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to the 58th Transportation Battalion, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an instructor. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Melissa, and family. General Beck is now presenting Staff Sergeant Dickerson his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Dickerson with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Staff Sergeant Retired Ronald Dickerson and family. Staff Sergeant Joshua J. Howard is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to 148th Infantry Battalion, 3rd Chemical Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a drill sergeant. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his family. General Beck is now presenting Staff Sergeant Howard his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Staff Sergeant Retired Joshua Howard and family. Staff Sergeant Stephen R. Odie is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Combat Training Company, 787 Military Police Battalion, 14th Military Police Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as an instructor. He is retiring to the state of Missouri with his spouse, Amber, and family. General Beck is now presenting Staff Sergeant Odie his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Sergeant Major Arzabala is now presenting Mrs. Odie with the Certificate of Appreciation and Bouquet in appreciation for her support to her spouse and family. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Staff Sergeant Retired Stephen Odie and family. Sergeant Cordell A. Pacero. Sergeant Cordell A. Pacero is retiring after a distinguished military career, culminating in his assignment to Alpha Company, 554 Engineer Battalion, 1st Engineer Brigade, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as a horizontal construction engineer. He is retiring to the state of Wyoming with his family. General Beck is now presenting Sergeant Pacero his retirement certificate and the American flag on behalf of a grateful nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you Sergeant Retired Cordell Pacero. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join me in a round of applause for all our retirees and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for Old Soldiers Never Die, Olin Zine, and the Army Song. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the ceremony. The retirees we have honored and their families await your congratulations. Thank you for your attendance.